So, what if the year 2026 is going to be defined by a massive collision? I'm not talking about something in space, but right here on Earth, between two powerful opposing forces. We're about to dive into a forecast that frames the entire year around this pretty dramatic clash.
You know, the best way to get your head around 2026 is with this image. Two massive tides colliding. One of these tides is a powerful force that's rising up from within humanity itself. And the other, well, that one's more of a cosmic wave from the universe. Their collision point, that's where the whole story of 2026 is really going to unfold.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll define these two big tides. Then, we'll dive into the darker of the two, what's being called a mental pandemic. After that, we'll look at its hopeful opposite, the negative cycle clearing. Then, we'll see where they clash the hardest, which is right in the world of AI, and we'll wrap up with a practical toolkit for how to navigate all this turbulence.
Okay, so at the very heart of 2026 are these two competing energies. You've got this powerful kind of turbulent force created by us, by humanity, which the source material calls a mental pandemic, but pushing right back against it is a force of renewal from the universe called a negative cycle clearing. So on one side, you have this tide of mass psychosis, basically a kind of collective insanity, and on the other, a tide of release and renewal. These two forces are literally pulling society in opposite directions at the exact same time. Let's start by unpacking that first, more troubling tide.
So what exactly is this mental pandemic? Well, it's described as a psychological epidemic. It's a period where an entire society starts to lose its grip on reality, and this distorted view actually becomes the accepted norm, the new sane.
The technical term for it is mass psychosis. This is what happens when rationality and just facts start to dissolve across an entire society. The really tricky part is, because it's a collective thing, the people inside of it don't even realize they've lost their grip. The delusion just becomes the new reality.
Now, to make this feel a bit more real, the source uses a really powerful historical example, the 16th century witch trials. See, you start with widespread distress, things like famine and war. Then, institutions exploit that fear by giving everyone a simple scapegoat, witchcraft. And all of a sudden, a new sanity takes hold, one where hunting and persecuting innocent people is seen as a perfectly rational solution.
What's really fascinating here is how you can map that historical pattern onto signs we might see today. You see people becoming irrational and extreme, emotional reactions just skyrocketing, and this bizarre flip where the person who's actually being rational is seen as the crazy one. Fear gets weaponized, and fake information just spreads like wildfire.
Now, the source material we're pulling from suggests a very specific goal for this modern mental pandemic. The idea is to wear people down with fear and anxiety until they're so exhausted that they willingly trade their freedom for some kind of relief, which could ultimately pave the way for totalitarian control.
But remember, that's only one of the two tides. Pushing back against this whole wave of confusion is another powerful and much more hopeful current, the negative cycle clearing. This is described as a universal push for some really profound change and a release from all the burdens of the past.
And this is the crucial point. While one force is pulling us into confusion, another is actively helping us break free. The source calls it a cosmic energetic assist. You can think of it like a universal tailwind, making it way easier to finally deal with old patterns that have held us, and maybe you, back for a long time.
And we're not just talking about some abstract idea. This energy is supposed to help clear out specific burdens. You know, things like trauma passed down through generations, old limiting beliefs, debts, bad habits, and even those relationships that just drain you. The whole point is to finally wipe the slate clean.
So for anyone who decides to engage with this clearing energy, 2026 is promising a pretty incredible sense of relief. It's being positioned as this powerful opportunity to genuinely start a new story, to get a truly fresh start in life. So where do these two massive tides collide most visibly? Well, the forecast points a giant finger directly at artificial intelligence. AI is apparently set to become the main arena where this battle between psychosis and clarity, between control and freedom, really plays out.
And with AI, you can see this duality perfectly. On one hand, it's this amazing helping hand, a problem solver that can do things far beyond our current abilities. But on the other hand, it's a very slippery road, an invention that could amplify our worst tendencies and threaten our very connection to what's real.
Let's look at the bright side first. AI is on the verge of completely revolutionizing medicine. I mean, we're talking personalized preventative care, designing new drugs to cure diseases, and finding solutions to huge global problems that have stumped us for decades. This lines up perfectly with that clearing tide. But the negative potential is just as strong. Think about a mass career crisis, an explosion of fake news that just dissolves any shared reality we have, and maybe even replacing real human connection with AI. These risks? They feed directly into the confusion and isolation of that mental pandemic.
And look, this isn't some far-off, distant prediction. The source drops a truly staggering statistic. By 2026, that's just around the corner, more than half of all content on the internet is predicted to be generated by AI. That just puts the speed and the scale of this whole thing into perspective, doesn't it? So why are we rushing toward AI, both the good and the bad parts? Well, the source argues it's because that mental pandemic has left us completely exhausted. As a collective, we are desperate for ease. We'll naturally gravitate toward whatever feels easiest, and let's be honest, AI offers the ultimate path of least resistance. Okay, so given this intense dynamic of push and pull, the obvious question is, how do you navigate it all? This final section is all about a toolkit, some clear, actionable advice from the source on how to manage these powerful forces without getting swept away.
So the big question is, how do you actually navigate this? How do you stay afloat and maybe even thrive when these two massive tides are colliding? Well, the forecast boils it all down to focusing on 4 key areas of your life.
So this toolkit basically has 4 main pillars. First, own your mind. That means you have to be disciplined about questioning what you think you know. Second, care for your nervous system. You have to recognize that it's under constant assault and really needs your attention. Third, value ethics. The source notes that our collective tolerance for unethical stuff is wearing thin. And finally, embrace celebration. Getting together with other people is presented as a powerful antidote to the isolation of the pandemic.
And the final piece of advice is this really powerful metaphor for balance. 2026 seems to be calling for bold action. That's the fire. But that fire has to be balanced with careful, deliberate planning. That's the water. It's all about fusing your passion with your wisdom.
And we'll end on this really powerful thought. In a year that's defined by a battle for our minds, the ultimate takeaway is just how important your own awareness is. Because in the end, whoever controls perception controls reality.